Hey everyone, and welcome back. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure to click the bell icon to get notifications for our latest deep dives.
Oh, yeah.
Today we're going deep into the world of human settlements.
Okay.
It's a topic that's relevant to all of us, whether you're a UPSC aspirant
Mm.
or a geography enthusiast,
Yeah,
or just curious about how we humans have shaped the spaces we live in.
exactly.
And we've got our expert guide here to walk us through it all. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Excited to dive into this. It's a vast topic.
It is.
Lots to unpack.
Well, let's start with the basics. What exactly are we talking about when we say human settlement? I mean, we all have a general idea, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think most people have a picture in their mind. But it's actually more complex than just people living in a place.
Okay.
The concept of permanence is key.
Permanence.
Yeah. Like, are we talking about people settling down for good or just temporarily? Like, think about nomadic communities setting up camps for a while and then moving on.
Right, so there's like a spectrum of permanence.
Exactly. And then within that, you have the whole rural versus urban divide.
Ah, okay. So it's not just about size then, like a big city versus a small village.
No, not necessarily. You can have massive villages in some parts of the world, like India or China, that have bigger populations than some European towns. It's more about how people interact with the land,
I see.
the kinds of economic activities they're engaged in,
Okay.
the whole way of life, really.
So it's more nuanced than just population numbers.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, let's start with those rural settlements then. What are some of the defining features that set them apart?
Life in rural settlements is intimately tied to the land.
Hmm.
People are directly involved in activities like agriculture, forestry, fishing, animal husbandry. It's all about working with natural resources.
Right, so their livelihood is directly connected to the environment.
Exactly. And this connection shapes everything from the pace of life to the social structures to even the architecture of their homes.
So it's like a whole different rhythm compared to urban life.
Absolutely. Now imagine you're flying over India and looking down at the landscape. What kinds of rural settlements do you think you'd see?
Hmm. Well, our sources mention several types, so I'm guessing there'd be a lot of variety.
You'd be right. India is a great example because it has such a diverse range of rural settlements.
Okay.
Picture this. You're flying over a fertile plain in the Ganges Valley.
Yeah.
You might see what we call a clustered settlement.
Clustered.
Yeah, the houses are all huddled close together, maybe arranged in a circular pattern around a lake or in a grid-like layout. Very efficient for agricultural communities.
Makes sense. Compact and close-knit.
Exactly. Now shift your gaze to Gujarat or Rajasthan.
Okay.
You might spot semi-clustered settlements.
How am I clustered?
Yeah, think of it like a clustered settlement that's starting to spread out,
I see.
maybe due to population growth or social divisions.
Interesting. So it's like a village that's evolving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, what about those hamleted settlements? Ever heard those?
I've heard the term, but I'm not sure I could picture it.
So imagine little pockets of houses,
Okay.
just a handful in each, often called pana, para, or pali, depending on the region. They're usually found in areas where social or ethnic factors have led to smaller, separate communities within a larger area.
Ah, so almost like mini villages.
Exactly. And finally, you have those dispersed settlements,
Right.
the ones tucked away in remote areas like the hills of Meghalaya or Uttarakhand, just isolated houses or small clusters dotting the landscape far from each other.
So that's driven by the terrain, I imagine.
Absolutely. Think about the need for grazing land or forests, or even just the difficulty of building on steep slopes.
Okay, so the landscape really dictates how people settle in those areas.
It's a major factor, but it's not the only one.
Oh. What else influences where these settlements pop up?
Well, fertile land is obviously a big draw.
Yeah, people need to eat.
Exactly. But it goes beyond that. Think about safety. Settlements often develop on higher ground to avoid floods.
That makes sense.
Historically, defense was crucial, which led to hilltop forts or even island settlements.
Right, so strategic location was key.
And then there's the need for water. Rivers, lakes, springs. They're lifelines for drinking, irrigation, even transportation sometimes.
Wow, that is life.
Absolutely. And then you have to consider building materials. Are there forests nearby for timber? Stone quarries for construction? All these factors play a role.
Wow, so it's like a whole web of considerations.
It is. And don't forget about the role of governments.
You mean planned settlements?
Exactly. Think about large-scale irrigation projects or resettlement programs.
Yep.
Ethiopia has a history of villagization, and India has those canal colonies built along major waterways. These are deliberate efforts to create settlements based on specific needs.
So it's not just about natural factors then.
Definitely not. Humans have always been actively shaping their environments,
Right.
and that includes where and how we settle.
So it's a mix of environmental factors, historical influences, and even government intervention.
You got it.
That creates this tapestry of rural settlements that we see across the world.
Right.
But let's be real. Rural life isn't always idyllic.
Right.
What are some of the challenges these communities face,
Well, one of the biggest hurdles,
especially in developing countries?
yes, especially in developing countries, is the lack of infrastructure.
Infrastructure like what?
Like access to clean water,
Okay,
sanitation, healthcare, education,
right.
all those things that are essential for development.
Yeah, and I imagine getting around is a challenge too.
Absolutely. Unmetalled roads, unreliable transport make it really difficult to access markets,
Yeah.
services, even emergency help. And this is especially true during the monsoon season when everything gets disrupted.
It's clear that while rural settlements are vital, they also face unique challenges.
Yeah.
Now let's shift gears a bit and head into the bustling world of urban settlements.
Okay.
What sets them apart from their rural counterparts?
So while there's no single definition of urban, it's really all about compactness, density, and function.
Mm-hmm.
So picture a place where most people aren't directly involved in extracting resources from the land.
Yeah.
They're working in manufacturing,
Mhm.
trade services, all those
Mhm.
things that make a city hum. It's like a shift from producing to processing, trading, and serving.
Interesting.
And just like rural settlements,
Yeah.
urban areas come in all shapes and sizes,
Hmm.
each with its own unique character.
Okay, so if I were to like time travel through India's urban history,
Mm-hmm.
what kinds of cities would I encounter?
Oh, you'd see an incredible evolution.
Yeah.
Imagine ancient cities like Varanasi steeped in spirituality and tradition.
Okay.
Then fast forward to medieval times, and you find fortified towns like Lucknow strategically placed and built for defense. And
Yeah.
then, of course, there are the modern metropolises that sprang up during the British era and after independence.
Wow. Talk about a crash course in urban history.
Right?
But how do we make sense of all these different types of cities?
Yeah.
Is there a way to classify them based on their size or function or something?
Absolutely. India's census, for example, classifies urban centers into 6 categories based on population size.
6 categories. Wow.
You've got everything from smaller towns to those massive megacities like Mumbai and Delhi bursting with over 10 million people.
Those megacities are like urban giants.
They are, and they're often part of what we call urban agglomerations.
Right. Our sources mention that term.
Uh-huh.
I'm not quite sure I get it.
So an urban agglomeration is essentially a continuous urban sprawl.
Okay.
A central city merges seamlessly with its surrounding suburbs,
Nice.
creating this massive interconnected region. It's like a super city, really. But we can also classify cities based on their function, their
Right.
specific role in the urban network.
So it's not just about size,
Right.
but about what makes the city tick.
Exactly. Take Chandigarh, for instance. It's a planned city designed primarily as an administrative center.
Yeah.
Then you've got industrial powerhouses like Mumbai or Jamshedpur. There are port cities like Kandla, strategically placed for trade, and even towns like Raniganj that revolve around mining activities.
So some towns are literally built around a single industry.
You got it. And don't forget about educational hubs like Roorkee or those spiritual centers like Varanasi and Amritsar. Each city has its own unique identity and purpose within the larger urban landscape.
It's incredible how diverse these urban ecosystems are.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
But the way cities are laid out, like their physical form,
Uh-huh.
must vary a lot too, right?
Absolutely. You've got cities like Chandigarh and Canberra,
Okay.
which were meticulously planned with wide avenues, green spaces,
Mhm.
distinct zones for different activities. Then you've got those cities that grew more organically over time,
Mhm.
often with a mix of historic architecture.
Yeah.
Narrow, winding streets,
I see.
bustling marketplaces. It's a whole different vibe.
So planned versus organic.
Right.
Like a perfectly manicured garden versus a wild, vibrant forest.
Yes.
Speaking of which, let's take a closer look at those 2 examples we mentioned earlier, Addis Ababa and Canberra. What makes them stand out in the urban landscape?
So Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, is a relatively young city perched on a hilly plateau.
Okay.
That unique topography has really influenced its layout with roads radiating out from central roundabouts.
Interesting.
And it's also home to one of the largest open-air markets in Africa.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. The Mercado?
Yes, the legendary Mikado.
I'm picturing a sensory overload of colors, sounds, and smells.
You got it. Traders from all over the region converge there, selling everything you can imagine, from spices and textiles to electronics and livestock. It's a microcosm of urban life.
Wow, that's quite a contrast to the carefully planned streets of Canberra.
Exactly. Canberra was designed as a garden city
A garden city.
with a focus on open spaces,
Yeah,
lush parks, well-defined neighborhoods. It's like a breath of fresh air compared to the hustle and bustle of Addis Ababa.
it sounds lovely.
Yeah, it was designed with specific zones for government buildings, residential areas.
Now, commercial centers, recreational spaces. It even has satellite towns to accommodate growth, each with its own distinct character.
So it's like a city designed for balance and harmony. But even a carefully planned city like Canberra must face challenges.
Oh, of course.
Right. No city is perfect after all. What are some of the common problems that plague urban settlements, especially in a rapidly developing world?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is the constant influx of people from rural areas
Right.
seeking a better life.
Yeah.
This migration can put a strain on resources,
Uh-huh.
lead to overpopulation and unemployment.
It's like a magnet drawing people in.
Yeah,
But the infrastructure can't always keep up with the demand.
exactly. And that leads to problems with housing,
Mm.
transportation,
Right.
basic services,
Yeah.
which in turn creates a cycle of poverty and hardship, especially for the most vulnerable populations.
It's like a ripple effect, one problem leading to another.
It is.
What about health concerns? Are those amplified in densely populated urban environments? Absolutely. Think about it. High population density makes it easier for diseases to spread.
Right.
Air and water pollution can lead to respiratory problems and other health issues.
Yeah.
And the stresses of urban life can take a toll on mental well-being.
So it's a reminder that city life, while alluring, comes with a hidden cost.
Definitely.
And our sources mention that natural disasters can be particularly devastating in urban areas.
Oh, yeah.
I'm guessing that's because of the concentration of people and infrastructure.
You're spot on. Imagine a major earthquake or flood hitting a densely populated city. The
Yeah.
potential for devastation is immense. Building collapses, widespread power outages,
Right.
disrupted transportation and communication breakdowns can make responding to emergencies incredibly difficult.
It's a sobering thought. And let's not forget about the environmental impact of cities.
Right.
Pollution is a major issue, from vehicle emissions to industrial waste, and even the mountains of garbage generated every day.
Yeah, cities are notorious for their ecological footprint. And the depletion of groundwater is a major concern too,
Okay.
as growing urban populations demand more and more water, putting a strain on already scarce resources.
It seems like there's a paradox here. Cities are hubs of innovation and opportunity,
Yeah.
but they also face this complex web of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder, are there any cities that are doing a particularly good job of balancing these competing forces?
There are certainly cities around the world that are making strides towards more sustainable and equitable urban development,
Okay.
but it's an ongoing process, a constant experiment, really.
I see.
And what works in one context might not be applicable in another.
So there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
Each city has to find its own path.
Exactly. Every city has its own unique set of challenges and opportunities shaped by its history, geography, culture,
Right.
economic realities. It's about finding solutions that are tailored to specific contexts.
It sounds like we need to be thinking beyond those generic models and really focusing on what makes each city unique.
Absolutely. It's not just about finding technological fixes
Right.
or imposing top-down policies.
Yeah.
It's about fostering a sense of ownership, engagement. Cities thrive when citizens are active participants
Right.
in shaping their environment,
Mhm.
not just passive residents.
It's like a giant collaborative project where everyone has a stake in the outcome. And that makes me think about the future of human settlements.
Okay.
What trends should we be paying attention to as we look ahead?
Well, one thing's for sure, urbanization isn't slowing down.
Right.
Cities are projected to absorb most of the global population growth in the coming decades. So the question is, how do we make that growth sustainable and
Well-
equitable?
That's a huge question. And I imagine climate change is going to play a major role in shaping that future.
Absolutely. Cities are on the front lines of climate impacts, rising sea levels, extreme weather events, heat waves, water scarcity. All these factors will challenge urban planners and policymakers.
So we need cities that are resilient, adaptable, able to weather those storms, both literally and figuratively.
Exactly. Think green infrastructure,
Yeah.
water conservation,
Yeah.
renewable energy, disaster preparedness. But it's not just about mitigating the negative, it's also about creating opportunities for a more sustainable and enjoyable urban life.
So what would that look like? Give me a vision.
Imagine walkable neighborhoods,
Okay.
efficient public transportation,
Yeah.
abundant green spaces,
I like.
thriving local food systems. It's about shifting away from car-centric sprawl,
Right.
embracing a more compact, mixed-use,
Hmm.
people-centered design.
It's like rethinking the very DNA of a city.
It is.
But that requires more than just urban planning, doesn't it?
You got it. It's a holistic challenge involving social policies,
Okay.
economic incentives,
Yeah.
and as we said before, community engagement.
So a massive undertaking, but also a chance to reimagine what our cities could be.
Exactly. And it's not just about cities.
Oh, right.
Rural communities are equally important. How do we support their economic vitality,
Yeah.
preserve their cultural heritage,
Mm-hmm.
ensure access to the resources and opportunities they need?
It's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
The dynamism of urban centers alongside the rootedness and ecological wisdom of rural communities.
Perfectly put. We're all interconnected,
Right.
and the well-being of urban and rural populations is inextricably linked.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic.
Yeah, there's so much more to explore.
But one thing's clear. The future of human settlements is ultimately about creating spaces where everyone can thrive, connect and contribute to our shared human experience.
Well said. And that future is something we all have a role in shaping.
Absolutely.
Whether we're studying for exams, designing buildings,
Right.
or simply engaging in our communities.
Yeah.
We can all contribute to creating a more just,
Yeah.
sustainable, vibrant world for generations to come.
And on that inspiring note, I want to thank you, our expert guide, for navigating this complex terrain with us.
It's been my pleasure. This is a topic that deserves all the attention we can give it.
To all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of human settlements. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more explorations into the topics that shape our world. Until next time, keep diving deep.